Today we're going to talk about the newest version of Frigate, version 0.0.9. And in this version, there are some breaking changes if you're running a previous version. So we'll go over those breaking changes, and we'll also talk about a few updates to the UI and a few updates to the way the architecture works when you're doing recordings. So let's get started. So let's get started by talking a little bit about some of the updates on the website. So this is the 0.91 release, and you need to be running the latest version of Home Assistant because you need the 2.0 or later integration. And it says here the version is not compatible with the current version of Home Assistant integration for clips in notifications or the media browser. You're going to have to use version 2.0 pre-release for the integration. All right, so here's some major changes for 0.9x. All right, clips have been recorded or merged into recordings. So Frigate now records footage from the camera just one time. You set up the retention settings to determine what you want to keep when it does those recordings. Now you can set it to retain all footage for the number of days you want, or have a different retention setting for the recorded footage that contains detected objects. So when you view the footage for an event, you are viewing the actual recorded footage for the time when the event occurred. The download clip button on the event is going to dynamically create an MP4 from the recordings for download. So the reason why is separating events and recording this way. It has some significant benefits according to the author. Overlapping events no longer mean that the same video footage is stored multiple times on disk. And then if you had an issue with the cache expiring, if you had a long running event, that is now no longer a problem. So here's the thing. If you use clips without 24/7 recording before, are you going to have to record 24/7, which of course is a big space issue? The answer is no. So if you only want to store footage of events, the following config is going to be used, and it shows you this here. I'll show you in my configuration how I did that in a little bit. Also, if you upgrade Frigate and you try to start it, you're going to get an error and it won't start up. And the reason why is that width height frame per second moved under the detect block. So they did this because there's a lot of confusion about the height width frame and where it's applied to. So now you can put it under a global section, or you can put it under the detect section of the camera. So in this case, you have under this camera code, you have detect, and then your width, height, and frame per second. In addition to those changes, and you have to make those changes in your config file or you're going to have errors, there is a different way to view everything. So now you can view footage directly in the web UI, and you can browse your recordings and events with a collapsible timeline view. So if we look at this picture here, for example, this is your timeline view over here on the right. You can select any of these items. And in addition to that, you'll see here that these times here have no event. So there's nothing here, but it still puts a timestamp on the timeline for you on an hourly basis. So you can see per hour which events occurred during that hour. Click on any of them and then view the actual footage in the window here. You can do this full screen. You can do this also collapsed. And this gives you your options for your different cameras. So you select different things here. And we'll talk about all of this in my live view here in a minute. Then there's mobile, and then there's mobile full screen. There's a new thing called bird's eye view. It's a live dynamic grid of all cameras with activities, and it has 3 modes you can set it for. You can have a camera pop up on the screen if there's an object detected. You can have a camera pop up if there's motion, or you can have cameras up all the time for continuous viewing. The purpose of bird's eye, according to the author, is to minimize bandwidth. So when there's no activity, this is what you're going to see. They're just going to be a black screen. So you can have it running, and then if something happens in the camera, in the view of the camera, it'll pop up based on which one of these settings you have it set to. There's also a live view. So live view is what we've been asking for a bunch in order to be able to view our cameras on a live basis. So live view is in the same spot as where the debug was before. The difference is you have a live view where it defaults to when you click on a camera, and then you have debug. You can still get to the debug and the settings screen as well. And there's a whole bunch of other changes in here. So let's jump into my actual configuration and my live view. The first thing I want to show you is I want to show you my configuration. So under those items that I talked about, a couple things have changed. The first thing is I have moved my detect underneath my camera itself. So I have two inputs or two paths. One is my main detect path, and the other one is my record path. And the difference is the different streams and substreams is the quality of the image. You don't need a super high quality full size image if you want to do detection, because the Frigate actually takes and looks at a very small snippet, and it actually has to resize that snippet or that view in order to see something. So it's extra work to do that. But I do want my recordings to be full resolution, and so I have this. And we talked about that in some of my other Frigate videos. The detection path is 640 by 480. That's what my substream is providing. So that's what I set this to. It's the same as what I had it set to before. The difference is it's in this different area under the camera directly instead of underneath the inputs or under the detect. Objects are the same, filters are the same, snapshots, all that is the same. One of the other things I had to do was comment out this or remove this clips block, because that is no longer being used. When I left this in and tried to restart, I got an error. So remove the clips block or comment it out if you want to leave it there for a reference. And in this case, I'm doing full 24/7 recording on this camera. So I just set record, enabled true, and my retained days is 5 days. And the same thing is true on my front porch camera. Everything is the same here, except, with the exception of the different areas where my motion masks and things are. Now, the difference I have between these cameras and the front porch and the front and driveway cameras in the back porch is that I don't record the back porch camera 24/7. I don't need all of that storage to be utilized or used up on my device because I don't need recordings back there. So what I've done is everything else is the same. We move our detect out here and we're commenting out our clips. But what I've done here, and this is in the documentation, is I set my retained days to 0. My events, I retain 5. So basically, I'm not retaining any recordings. So I'm not recording 24/7, but I am retaining up to 5 days, or for 5 days, any recordings that contain an event. So that's how you go from not recording 24/7 in the old version or older versions of Frigate to the way they're recording all the time, but not storing that on the disk for those cameras. So two different examples of the way I set up the recordings. One is 24/7, always have something there. And the other one is only events are retained on those recordings. All right, so let's go look at some of the UI and some of the camera itself. And let's talk a little bit about what I've seen from here. So in my camera here, we're looking at my Frigate view. And we're looking at my various cameras. Now, this is just a standard Frigate MVR view. These are just images that they don't update. They just sit here. What you have now, though, is you have events, which we've always had in the previous version, but we have this thing called recordings now. And of course, you have the 3 different options here. If you don't specify recordings, I've noticed the recordings icon here is actually toggled off. So you have to specify in the config file recordings, either during the recordings where you don't record, or you don't store the 24/7 recording and only the events, or you do the 24/7 recording like I've done here. So make sure you specify one of those so that it defaults to turning the recordings on. When I didn't have that specified on this camera, the recording icon was toggled off, and we can just toggle one of these. You can see it turns it gray down here, and you can see that it turns it off, or recordings are turned off. So make sure you specify in the config if you want to get these events to be recorded. Otherwise, it just gives you snapshots. Okay, so that is this. If you click on recordings on any of these, what you're going to get is you're going to get that timeline. Now, what I find interesting is that I haven't found a way to get from the camera or this main view and into recordings without doing what I just did. It's a little bit of a UI user experience thing here, where I would like to be able to get to this listing of cameras over here without having to go to a camera first. But I start in my NVR and I just click on one of these. It doesn't matter which one. And then I get all my cameras listed here. And I can click through these cameras and I can pick up the timeline and I can view what's going on there. So now we can see on the right-hand side here, and let me just get rid of myself for a second. You can see on the timeline here that I've got recordings for this morning. And then if I come down, I've got no recordings between 6 a.m. and midnight. And if I come down here the next day, I've got nothing between 11 p.m. and 8 p.m. But then I have a recording here at 6, whatever the time this is, or 8 o'clock. So then I click on it. And what's also interesting in the UI is when you first bring this up, you actually have to click on the start of the recording or start playing the recordings. If you click through any of the rest of these, they auto play. But the first time you go into the camera, you have to start the recording. And then you can click through all these events and see what's going on. So now you just click through the timeline. And let me tell you, this is a by far biggest improvement I've seen in the UI, because I'm used to, in Blue Iris, being able to click through the timeline and look at all my events. So here I just click on these events through the timeline and we can just view them as we go. And you can just go to any one of the cameras. Now I didn't have recording enabled on this camera until this morning when I saw it wasn't working. And so I have no history here until I enabled that recording. And then of course the lights turn off or something here. Now, if you're looking at these recordings here and you want this window out of the way, it's collapsible. So you just click it and boom, it goes away. And then it comes back again. And then you have your full listing. Now, some of these things are auto collapsed. You can collapse by day and just go through and look at this stuff and just kind of click through. So it's super nice for the interface here. All right, so let's look at, let's look over here at the bird's eye view. Now, the bird's eye view is something to me that leaves a little bit to be desired. And the reason why, and first, when you first start it, you'll see this white screen. It'll take a minute for it to load itself. Now, there's nothing going on in this bird's eye view until a camera actually picks up some sort of object detection. And you can set it to motion. You can set it to continuous, any one of those things. And that will give you, if you want motion, anytime there's motion on the camera, it's going to bring it up on this screen. If you just want object detection, like a person, car, bicycle, whatever, then you'll see it pop up on the screen. What I don't like about this bird's eye view is what it pops up on the screen is your detect stream. So if you're using a low resolution 640 by 480 detection screen or stream, the quality of the image is going to be quite grainy, and you know, I would rather see the full screen view than seeing this grainy version. Okay, so there's not a lot going on with object detection. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change my bird's eye configuration to be motion detection, so that if there's any motion on cameras, we'll see it pop up on here. And that way we can get a good example of what's going on. So to do that, I'm going to go back over here to this configuration file directory or site, and I'll link these down below. There's a section in here that talks about configuration file. And here's a whole block on bird's eye. And some of this is optional. Some of it defaults to certain things. I'm going to click and copy this, and I'm going to paste it into my my Frigate file. I'm just going to put it at the bottom of my Frigate configuration. And I'll just leave all the comments for now. It's enabled true with, I'm going to change this to 640 by 480 because that is the resolution of my detect substreams on my cameras. Now, quality is optional, but it defaults to 8, with 1 being the highest quality and 31 the lowest. Lower quality feeds utilize less CPU. So what it's doing is it's taking this and moving it from, it's running in JSMPEG instead of MPEG, and it has to re-encode it. So right now it's set as default to objects. And again, you can see the 3 different options you have here. I'm going to change it to motion. And what this will do is, and I'll save it here by Control-S'ing. What this is going to do is this going to give you, anytime there's motion, it's going to bring up one of the camera views here. Now, if you look over here on the right, if if you click on this restart Frigate, this doesn't actually reload the configuration file for some reason. I don't know if it's supposed to, but I've tried this a few times and my changes weren't picked up. So don't use the restart Frigate if you make configuration changes because they may not show up. So now what I'll do is I'll go back over to Supervisor and I'm going to restart Frigate from the actual add-on. So let's restart it. Always check your logs. Make sure they're happy with what you're doing. All right, so it's starting up here. It found all the stuff. It found the TPU. If you're not using a TPU, I really highly recommend it. It speeds up your detection and takes the load off your CPU. All right, so it's up and running. We can go back into the web UI now. And we're back up. Now, if we go back to bird's eye view, you can see now the aspect ratio has changed. The box is different. And that's another thing I don't like about it. I would prefer to be able to size this window so that I can fit it all on a screen. I have to actually scroll. And if you're on a laptop or something, this screen isn't going to be as good. Now, this is one single camera, and it saw motion there. It picked up a car. But you can see how grainy and, to me, I'm going to say yucky looking this image is. And if you're just trying to get an idea of whatever's going on around you, this is fine. It will still record in full resolution if you're set up to do that. If your record stream is set to record full resolution from your camera, then that will show up as full resolution. All this is doing is giving you a view of what motion or whatever object is in the camera view. And I was hoping to get a couple of more cameras to pop up here at the same time, so we get motion from more than one. But when you do have more than one camera, it'll put the multiple cameras in this bird's eye view. It doesn't make them go below each other. What it does is it takes that area where the black window is, and it crams all the cameras into that area. So right now, since there's one camera, this whole thing is filling up the 640 by 480 space. Now, when you look at the bird's eye view settings and you're setting this width and output, this is not the width and output of the camera. This is a width and output of that black box where it's going to display all your cameras. So if you have a tablet or something where you need a very specific resolution to fit all of that in there, then you would change this here. And I'm going to put it back to 1280 by 720 since that's kind of the size of the stream or the size of my, my browser window. I'm going to save it again. We're going to restart. We will see that that black box changes so that we fit all that on the screen a little bit better. So let's just look at the logs. All right, we're up and running. Let's go to the web UI. Back to bird's eye. Now you can already see here, I'm doing a little scroll here. It's 1280 by 720, which is this window right here. Now what it will do is it'll take all those cameras that pop up with motion and fit them in this window. If there's one camera, it will take the entire window. If there's more than one camera with motion, it will fill in this window. It's still going to give you the resolution that the camera is displaying at. So you can see here, of course, this is a 640 by 480 camera image, and it's fitting in a 1280 by 720. So it's like the old days when you had SD television and you had the square screen. That's basically what we're looking at right now inside of it's a square TV show inside of an HD window. And now you see we have another camera here, and these cameras run, I believe, for 30 seconds. That's a setting you can change as well. How long these cameras sit here in this window, in this bird's eye window. Cross my fingers that I get a camera outside to light up as well here. But this will display for X number of seconds, probably 30 seconds, and then it will go away back to the black screen. See, now we do have two cameras, and see how they actually fit on the window. So if you have more than one camera with motion or whatever the detection is you set, you'll see them both on here, and they'll display in whatever detect resolution your detect stream is. Now the first camera timed out, and we're back to just the main camera. So it's handy if you want to have a screen and you want it to not use bandwidth unless there's actual activity. being on a street like this, I don't want motion, I want objects. So I only want to show up when there's a person detected or a bicycle or whatever my object detections are. That's that. Now you notice over here on the left-hand side, I can't get back to the recordings, which is kind of what I said. The UI needs a way to get from here to other places. So yeah, like a little breadcrumb or something. So I have to go back to cameras. And if I want to look at a live view of a camera, I'll click on the camera itself like we've done in the past. And again, here's the live view. Again, what I don't like about this is the live view is not the full featured camera or the full resolution camera. And there's no way to set that. The only way to see the full camera is to go directly to the camera stream. So we're looking at the 640 by 480 lower resolution detect stream. I would rather see on the live view the full camera view. Now, I believe the reason this is this way is if you click on debug, you're now back on the actual debug screen of the camera. And this allows you to set things like your bounding by or your motion or your zones and your masks. And this is the detect window that you will set all this up in. So you have to use this window to set it properly, which is why when you go live, it's the same view of the same window. Now, it does look better when you go to debug because it's actually shrinking it down into a smaller window, so it makes it less grainy. Anyway, I wish there was a way to set the live view to be an actual live full resolution camera or the recording live view, not the detect live view. But overall, I'm really pleased with this. And by the way, you can go from camera to camera here on the left. This is not something we were able to do before either. But it gives you the ability to bop around cameras without having to go back to the main screen and then come in here and go to another camera screen. So there we have it. That is the new version of, or the newest version of Frigate 0.91 or 0.9.1. As of this recording of this video, this is the newest version. I'm sure at the rate that he's going, he will continue to make improvements, or the community will continue to make improvements. I still have been using this over Blue Iris for the last 3 or 4 months. I really like it. It's working well for me. And these improvements to the NVR are just another step in making this a full-featured NVR that allows us to scan around and jump around into clips, look at timelines to see what's going on individual cameras, and be able to get live views, be able to get the bird's eye view and see only activity when there's activity. If you have any comments, put those down below. Also hit me up on Discord. If you're not a channel member, please consider joining the channel. It helps us support what I do here. And if you have any other comments, questions, concerns, let me know about those, and I will answer those as best I can. We'll see you on the next video.